Hello, hello, welcome to Mindset to Results. Today, our guest is Chris Van Berger, and he is a Chief Financial Officer for a non-profitable organization called Nest, and he is also the lecturer and the author of the book with the topic of corporate responsibility and responsible sourcing. Hi, Chris.
Hello, thank you for having me, Elena.
You're most welcome. And thank you for being guest on our podcast.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, we will speak today about an interesting topic. I would say it is very unique. And the topic is how to identify that the business and products are ethical and why it even matters.
Yes,
So,
indeed. Yeah, it's a big topic of conversation for sure.
yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself, how you found this is so important for you in your life that you dedicate now your time and efforts in that business to help people to understand about ethics and know the what is behind the products which they see on the shelves.
Sure. Yes, certainly it was a long journey for me to get to where I am. And I have been working at Nest for the last 15 years. We're a 20-year-old organization. It was founded by my wife 20 years ago. And Nest, for those of you who don't know, is a nonprofit that works in the artisan and the handcraft space. And so we do lots of things in that space, but related to the conversation at hand, we work with brands and retailers and designers and help them understand the transparency in their supply chain. And because of the nature of handcraft, if you think about it, often it's actually done at home, in homes all around the world. It's a craft tradition. Obviously, has been in existence since the beginning of time, but often those handcraft products are still done in home. They're not done in a traditional factory, and we were finding that we had lots of brands and retailers that were wanting to source product, but were hesitant to do so. And for us, our mission is really to serve those artisan and handcraft businesses, and so we asked them why. Why don't you want to, source these amazing products and help all these amazing communities around the world? And the response was that there was too much risk, which is not really something we had thought about. And we said, well, what do you mean? And they said, in a traditional supply chain, they're working with factories and they know who's making the product and is it safe and are they getting paid and all of the really important questions. In the handcraft space, nobody, and in this home working setup, nobody was able to tell them that information. And so that was really a big light bulb moment for me personally, and for Nest as an organization. And we said, okay, well, if this is the hurdle to get more people sourcing the product, and then of course consumers buying the product, then let's figure out how to solve for it. And so over the course of many years, we built out a supply chain transparency program. And through that effort, I got to see a peek behind the curtain for brands and retailers and all of the hard work that goes into it when they're putting products on the shelf that they really want to stand behind, and what it means to be an ethical business in a number of different ways. Responsible sourcing, clearly, because that's a place where I have expertise. Um, and then beyond Nest, during my time at Nest, I got an executive MBA at NYU, New York University, Stern School of Business. And I was surrounded by business executives and business students who are all asking these questions. Well, they say they're ethical, they say they're responsible. How do we know that? Is it just marketing? And how do you really tell? Besides the fact that every customer, or not every, but most, are now going and they want to know that they have some power in their purchase, right? And it's really confusing. And so all of those things wrapped together are really what led me to being incredibly passionate about it, helping Nest stand up this program, and then writing about it and then lecturing about it.
Yeah, very interesting. So tell us, please, more about those labeling in the shops and how it is regulated and how the products can potentially maybe not have what it is. Is it possible that uh, what is in label is not what is really was used. So because this is very new topic for me, and I'm sure there will be more people who would like to know
Sure.
more about this.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's one that I get asked a lot. And unfortunately, I think we're still at a point where the customer has to do a lot of their own research as far as what the different labels mean. And I'll explain when it's done right, what a label does on a product and how it gets there, and then places where maybe the consumer should be asking more questions and a little bit more careful. And so working backwards, if you go and I mean, for say for Nest, if you go to say Target and you buy a basket, you will probably see the Nest seal on there. The seal is that little, that mark, that certification mark, and ours says ethically handcrafted is the little seal, has a little picture of a bird on it. And that's kind of the end, right? That's like once they've gone through this whole program, we at Nest can say, yes, those products can have that label on it. But there's a ton of work that happens before you even get there. So maybe it might be helpful to talk a little bit about how Nest works in our program. So we'll get introduced by a retailer to their producer business, right? And for those of you who aren't in supply chains or in product purchasing, more often than not, the business itself, that the store that you go to buy the product, does not own their production center or their supply chains. That's generally not how it works. Sometimes, but it's increasingly rare. So what they do is they work with third-party businesses that are experts in that particular production, whether it's say baskets or pottery or glasswork, whatever it is in terms of the handcraft stuff, furniture. But this analogy pertains to literally any product. It is rare that a brand or a business is going to what's called vertically integrate, meaning that they own every part of their supply chain. So that brand has to work with a third-party producer. Um, in the Nest case, we get introduced to those producers and we work with them from day one to make sure that they have established processes and procedures and oversight mechanisms to make sure that they can meet the Nest standard. The standard is something that we developed over many, many years. There are probably over 100 plus individual, you can almost call them rules, I guess, that a business needs to follow in their production to become compliant, to be able to pass, an audit, an assessment, consider it a test. And those rules range from everything from verifying the ages of workers and documenting that to make sure that children aren't in the supply chain, to health and safety practices, to how they're setting wages, how they're paying wages. Do the workers have some sort of mechanism to voice concerns if their boss or the contractor that they're working with isn't treating them well? It's a very, very long list. It's very extensive. And we work with these businesses to set up, if they aren't in place already, to set up these processes and procedures and the trainings with all, up and down the supply chain. Again, remember the Nest supply chain, we work with home workers, so people in their homes. So much more complicated than a traditional factory model. And we need to make sure that the workers themselves understand what their rights are, what their responsibilities are, and all those sorts of things. Is their home setup safe? Are they using chemicals or fire in their technique that needs to be accounted for? That kind of stuff. So we work with those businesses, set all that stuff up. The business operates probably for the better part of a year using these processes and procedures. And then Nest, as a third-party assessor, comes in and we assess them. We kind of test to make sure that everywhere in the supply chain they are indeed following all of these processes and procedures. The people are getting paid fairly. That what's on the books, if that basket costs $30, we make sure that the worker's actually making that same $30. All of those things. We really pressure test the entire supply chain. And if the supply chain does well, they will pass that assessment. If they score high enough as a gold standard, they can then be certified. And once you're certified, that's when you can have the seal on the product. So when you go to buy that product and you see the Nest seal, you're like, oh, I see, that was sourced from a responsible producer, and the brand and the producer work together to make sure that it was sourced ethically. So that's that's the kind of, there's a lot more involved, but that's this, it gives you a sense maybe of the hard work that happens before you can ever put a label on. The challenge becomes that historically speaking, there are also labels that can signify that you're just a member of an organization that has, ethical principles, and it's almost more like a membership seal as opposed to an indicator that that production facility passed that audit, that assessment. And so that's when it's really up to the consumer to say, okay, I see this label here. I have to, go on the internet and look to see, what does that program actually mean? Is it a true certification process like the Nest program? And there are many of them out there. But there are also some of these sort of membership seals, or a business is kind of putting their own mark on something that doesn't actually mean a whole heck of a lot. Maybe they paid into a program, or maybe they signed an agreement saying, yeah, we're going to abide by those principles, but then nobody's actually verified that that's actually happening in the supply chain, that the workers are positively impacted by that type of program. And so that's really where it gets a little tricky for the customer, the consumer, that they need to identify which of those programs, first of all, resonate with their own personal values, right? Some people want to make sure everything is environmentally conscious, and not providing, not doing negative harm to the environment. Some people are more focused on the labor side of the equation, so are the workers being treated fairly, et cetera, et cetera. Some are both. So that's an individual decision as far as which path you want to go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
hopefully
for.
that answers your question.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing. And can you please tell about your book? What is?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The book is called Certifiable. Certifiable: How Businesses Operationalize Responsible Sourcing. And the book for me came out of actually teaching. So for many years, I've taught courses in business school related to how businesses can really make sure that they're operating responsibly in their supply chains. And time again, I was being asked these questions by the students, and then also when people found out I was teaching it, by general people are just really interested in making sure that their purchases are responsible. And so I put this book together really as a primer as far as what responsible sourcing means. And it covers everything from how Nest stood up our certification program and what that looks like, and the work that happened behind that. It talks about businesses that are one of the knocks against responsible sourcing, or frankly corporate responsibility in general, is that, oh, it doesn't actually help the business, or it doesn't lead to more profit, or it doesn't help you in the market. And so in the book, I also talk through some examples of businesses that have done it really well. Like, frankly, the gold standard of this is Patagonia, from their founding story all in the 60s, I think, all the way to present day, and how they've changed their business model to really be resonating with their values. So I dive into things like that. I talk about marketing. I talk about things you can be wary of related to greenwashing. And greenwashing, for those of you who don't know, is when a brand is marketing a product as, say, it's, again, environmentally friendly, and they're marketing all these things, but it doesn't actually mean anything. It's just marketing. That's greenwashing. To kind of talk about some of the pitfalls to avoid. But what I also talk about in the book is ways that businesses internally can create an operating structure that leads to greater corporate responsibility, and what teams need to be in place, what folks within those teams should be talking to each other, and really how it works well. And to give you an example, there are essentially three different structures to the ways businesses approach sustainability or corporate responsibility. In one, you can consider it a siloed approach, where there is a team that's focused on sustainability or responsibility, but they operate completely independent from the rest of the business. They'll put out reports and they'll put out recommendations from time to time, but they aren't integrated into business making decisions, into the production or the sourcing teams. And so they just kind of sit separate and aside. It's not very effective. And that, frankly, was the original model of how most of the businesses were structured. Then there's a model which you can consider more of a hybrid approach, where there's, again, this responsibility team, this sustainability team, and they sit at the table when you have design and production and sourcing and all the, finance and all the folks, and they lend their voice to those conversations. They try and provide best practices in terms of decision making and things like that. That's definitely, I would say, still probably where the majority of businesses are, and it's better. And then there's the integrated approach, which is, frankly, again, it's the Patagonia model, where any business decision related to a product starts with the responsible sourcing team, with the sustainability team. And if it passes their test, essentially, then it can proceed, and then they can start talking about additional sourcing opportunities, additional products, things like that. But it really starts with that team. They have a lot more power and control in terms of the conversation. They also have the ability to say, as a product is being developed or being sourced, they can actually say, wait a minute, we're now seeing that this actually has some negative impacts that we don't like, so we have to push pause on this, or we have to back away from this opportunity. And that is definitely, it's harder, it's more of a challenge, but doing it that way, you're then deeply embedded. You embed all these responsibility practices within your entire operating model. So I talk about those types of things as well. I talk about how corporate finance plays a role, because, like, again, I didn't really mention this, but like responsible sourcing, there is a cost there, right? I mean, there's the internal teams that need to be involved. You're involving a third party like Nest, or, an auditing firm or whoever. The production business themselves probably has to put more time and effort into making sure that these training practices are happening. And so, how does corporate finance play a role? Are there levers that can be pulled to lower a business's cost of capital? So, like, if a business is taking on debt, and there are programs where, if you meet certain sustainability criteria or certain ethical criteria, the lender that's lending you the funds will actually lower their financing terms. So you can actually, again, lower your cost of capital for doing business. And so I talk about all these kind of innovative models throughout the course of the book. But it's geared towards both somebody who might be in business school or is working in a business, running a business, but also folks who, frankly, are just interested in the space. I candidly wanted to make sure it was a book that, my family can read, my wife's grandmother could read, and she would get something out of it. So that was the framework behind the book.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's you do such a important work because you do this so much search behind the product. So the consumers, when they see the label with your certification, they can be sure that this is ethical and the sourcing is good and nothing wrong with the product. It's a very
Exactly.
and what advantages it gives to the producers to have that
Mm,
certification. Yes,
great.
besides that, the consumers know that it is ethical. Is there any
Yeah.
other advantages?
Great. Yeah. There's actually two questions in there. One is for the producer businesses, and the other is for the brand. And I do want to answer both.
Right.
For the producer businesses in the program who do get certified, they now have the opportunity to tell any other brand that, hey, look, like, you're worried about ethical sourcing. We've been vetted by this organization that is a third party, that's a trusted source. So if you want, say, again, I keep talking about baskets, but if you want baskets that are ethically sourced, come to us, because Nest can show you, so for them, it can be a huge marketing win for them. It's also beneficial for them because, frankly, their workers are happier. Their workers feel like they're being cared for.
Mm,
And by the nature of our program, we're opening up all these new pathways of communication between the workers and this producer business, who often aren't really directly linked because there are layers of subcontractors and it's a complicated supply chain. But once we open up that transparency, the workers can actually have a voice. And I've seen this happen in real time, where workers will say, if you got us those materials just 2 days earlier each week, we could be so much more efficient, and we could be making so much more product for you, instead of like being done and then having to wait, that kind of thing. And so it's really interesting seeing that happen. So there's a big benefit for the producer business if they're able to put the time and the effort in. For the brand, there are a couple benefits for being able to demonstrate that they're responsibly sourcing. One, we talked a little bit about it before, but consumer interest. There is a rise in consumer interest related to ethically sourced products. I would say it even boosted after COVID because everybody started talking about supply chains during COVID, right? It was all about the toilet paper and all about the things you couldn't get. Like, oh, right, other people make this stuff. It doesn't just magically appear on the shelf. And so people have started thinking about that. And they started thinking about, well, who's making this product? During COVID, it was like, are they being safe? Are they like, what's their health situation happening? Or, it was a lot about order cancellation and brands saying, you know what, we can't, we can't buy that order that we placed before. So how those brands needed to operate ethically. So people have started thinking about that. So there's definitely a rise in consumer interest related to this topic. Combined with a increase in the ability to get more information based on the internet, based on social media, based on all the things. And so some brands are really leveraging that to its fullest, really trying to beat their own competition by demonstrating, hey, we're more responsible than those folks if their consumer is really interested in that. So come to us and maybe they can steal some consumers from that other competitive brand, that kind of thing. So there's that. There's also on the investment side, which we hadn't talked about yet in this conversation. And there is impact investing is a real interest and a real thing. And it is a growing topic of conversation. And increasingly, businesses need to demonstrate to their investors, whether you're privately held or whether you're a publicly traded company, that you have some sort of ESG metrics. ESG stands for environmental, social, governance metrics that it's kind of a way of measuring that you are indeed operating ethically beyond, say, putting a seal on the product. And there are a number of different schemes within which you can measure these things. And I'm not going to that's way too technical. I'm not going to get into that for this conversation, but there are kind of methodologies within which businesses can report out that. It's like, here's our annual sustainability report. Here's our quarterly, ESG related statement, that kind of thing. So investors who are interested in making sure their investment is responsible, just like their product purchase is responsible, we'll be looking for those types of companies, and doing it that way. And there is one third way, and that is that there is an increase in regulation related to responsibility in the supply chain. And what I mean by that is that governments, it's primarily happening in Europe, but with fits and starts, it's been happening in the US as well. Governments are requiring more responsibility by the businesses that are sourcing their products. So, like I said earlier, a business probably doesn't own their full supply chain. And historically speaking, that meant that they weren't really legally responsible for what was happening downstream in their supply chain. I mean, it was bad if something bad happened, right? And there would be bad press, there'd be other things. But now that tide is turning a bit where governments are saying, no, 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 even if you don't own the supply chain, if something bad happens there, we will, pursue you in terms of, whether it's taking you to court, whether it's big fines, other things. So there is all of a sudden becoming more of a legal ramification there as well. So I would say it's sort of a threefold issue with brands and opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. So, did you have that experience in your 12 years practice that companies were not like what they were telling or showing was not real?
Uh, um, yes, I have seen it happen. And I will say that Nest is very careful with who we partner. Um, and so there is a bit of a selection process up front. We do a lot of vetting in terms of, who is coming to the table, who's partnering with Nest in terms of the program. Do they really firmly believe in it? But there have been times where either the producer business has been having issues in the supply chain that they've been trying to hide forever because no one's ever really asked the questions, or places where the brand at the end of the day is not willing to pay a price on the product that the worker will then be making a fair wage. And it's a challenge. It is a big challenge because again, there is a cost to this. And often in supply chains like ours, which are very complicated, the workers have been making maybe the same wage for that particular item forever, for the last 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. It's always been, let's say, $15 to make that little thing. The cost of living has gone up quite a bit in those 15, 20 years. And that hasn't really been factored in, nor has the time that it takes to make that product. And so that has, I've seen it happen where we come in, we assess the whole supply chain, we say, actually, brand, you really should be paying twice what you're paying because the workers aren't making a fair wage. They're not making what they need to make. And the brand either does it, those brands that really believe in it, like, yes, okay, we'll figure out how to, either we have to increase our price to the consumer a little bit, or we'll figure out something to do, and they figure it out. Or the brand says, you know what, we're not going to do that. And at that point, we say, well, then they're not going to be certified, and you aren't going to be able to put that label on the product. And there are other ramifications there. Um, on the supply chain side, the issues often come from the fact that the supply chain we deal with, before Nest comes in and institutes our whole program, the supply chain is relatively invisible, and it's invisible because you have a producer business that then works with multiple layers of subcontractors, because it's really, again, they're going into homes. So like one person can't go into 1,000 homes, right? It's just not possible. So you wind up having, say, 10, 20 different individuals who are then working with 20, 30 individual, again, I keep talking about baskets, but say basket weavers. And it's, before a program like ours, it's very hard for that business, the producer business, to know, is every one of those subcontractors paying the same fair wage to that worker? Because no one's really asked them for that before. So we can come in and we can very quickly find who are those bad actors in the supply chain. It's like, oh, these 18 are doing great. And yes, they've been paying exactly what everyone thinks. Those two over there never seem to pay what is right. And then when push comes to shove, the brand or the business has the opportunity to say, okay, you two, if you're not going to get on board with this program, you're not going to work with us anymore. Right. And so we see that happen a lot. And either they get in line and say, okay, 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 yeah, I'll start paying the right, whatever. And oh, I didn't understand, whatever. Or they won't, and then they'll no longer be working with that producer business. So we're able to kind of weed those things out. But um, hopefully that answers your question. But yes, I've seen quite a bit in my time in this program.
Yeah, really, you do such a great job just even to protect and be on the side of those workers. Yeah, because as you said, handcrafted products can be like produced in different countries, and we can just guess what can be behind those products. Yes, and of course, when we want to buy something, wouldn't like to have any negative energy be involved in the process. Yeah, because
Absolutely.
yes, as you mentioned, that maybe children, yeah, could be used to produce something, and it is good to have this certification and label to which will show that all was really great. Yes, I appreciate for this information because it was a lot new for me also, and this conversation made me more aware, yes, about all this, what is behind. I also want to ask you a question, how you can check everything because there are so many different suppliers, yes, for one
Yeah.
product. So how physically you can even manage to check everything in so many products? Like how many clients do you have in a year? Just interesting
Yeah.
to know the numbers.
Yeah. It's a fabulous question, because you're right. It is a very complicated supply chain. Um, the way it works for us is, and frankly, the way it also works in a more traditional kind of compliance program, like with a factory, is the assessor or the auditor, however you want to call them, normally takes a percentage of the workers that they're going to interview in any given year. And our assessment is every single year, because this is a very dynamic and complicated supply chain. And to answer your question, we work with a lot of different brands, a lot of different supply chains. I say in any given moment, we are working with maybe 20 to 50 brands and then their supply chains, some more so than others. Some have more homework in their supply chain than others. And we only, to be very clear, we only work in non-factory production models. So, if they're producing with a factory, they can work with a more traditional auditing firm and stuff.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, and this is spread across, gosh, at last count, I think it's 20 different countries, 15 to 20 in a given year. Some, again, more active than others. But so our auditing process takes place every year, and we take a percentage of those workers. It's a randomized percentage every single year that we're going to directly interview, because it's, at the end of the day, the rubber meets the road at the worker level. If the worker doesn't know what the health and safety protocols are. If the worker doesn't know that there is a way for them to speak up if there's an issue with their, their direct boss, then that's a big problem. So, you have to have all the procedures and the processes and the paperwork. You have to have all that in place, yes. But there's this kind of secondary verification that it's actually getting to the worker and impacting the worker is absolutely critical. So we take a percentage of that in any supply chain. And then every single year, again, it's randomized, but we make sure we're hitting a different group of workers. So over the course of just a couple of years, depends on the size of the supply chain, but over a couple of years, we'll make sure we've talked to every worker in that supply chain. And then we just keep kind of rotating through and cycling through. And if there's a new subcontractor that comes in a year, we'll make sure we're looking at their process and procedures, that they've been trained up appropriately, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of how we handle that. And because we're spread across so many different countries, we have folks that we work with in those countries that understand the cultural context, understand the community, understand the language, and we can then work with them to make sure that the conversations are happening the way we want. So that's how we kind of distribute the work across lots of different supply chains and lots of different workers.
Yeah, it's just such a great and complicated like work as it seems. Yeah, so
Indeed.
people do you have, like how many staff you have in your company who do
We
this job?
Yeah, no, that's great. We have a core team. Our business itself, the nonprofit, has 33 employees, but we do a number of different programs. The compliance and the supply chain transparency piece is really just one of those verticals of our business. And within that, we have a core team of 6 or so. But again, we have folks on the ground that aren't full-time members of Nest, but have been trained and are essentially verified by Nest every single year, that then do the work that's out in the community. So our team does probably 50% of it, 50% of the audits. We do all the training programs. And then depending on the region or the country, we work with all of these different folks. So probably, if I had to guess, probably another 20 or so that will do these assessments at any given time, that are all kind of, they're part of Nest, but they're not technically, a part of Nest in terms of full-time employees.
Yes, and you are a non-profit organization, so how you build this business? Do you accept donations, or it is just when
Yeah.
you certification which companies pay you? How do
Yeah,
you?
it's great question. So we are a bit of an unusual nonprofit in the sense that we accept donations like any traditional nonprofit. We are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, right? So we do have individuals, foundations, corporate philanthropy that support our programs and our work. That being said, for things like the compliance program, when there's a direct business benefit for a brand to get this certification program, they will pay us fee for service. So as a nonprofit, we do have a large chunk of earned revenue that comes into our organization as well. And we can justify that because all of the work is still in pursuance of our mission as a nonprofit. It's getting down to that worker level. It's really supporting those handcraft and artisan businesses. And so that's sort of how our finances work. So we've been able to really diversify our revenue streams as an organization, which has been great. But if you can sort of think about us almost like a good solid half of our organization really works like a traditional nonprofit. It's essentially pro bono consulting for thousands of handcraft businesses spread across over 120 countries. And that's all free services for them because of the philanthropy. And on the other side, we have well, essentially paid consulting services, right? The supply chain transparency work is a huge chunk of that. We do a lot of sourcing strategy and support for brands and businesses too, where they will pay us fee for service to perform that work for them. And again, at the end of the day, we just want more people buying the handcraft products, supporting more livelihoods, which really empowers those communities in a really, really tangible way. So.
Yeah, that is great job which you provide and support so many people who produce these handcrafts. Yes, and it is good to know about it. So next time I will go to the shop, I will look for Nest label.
Yes, you should. You should. And then just go to our website. We talk a lot about all of our programs. Websites buildanest.org, and you can learn all about compliance program. You can learn about all the services we offer for all of the handcraft and artisan businesses around the world.
Yes, amazing, amazing. And we, of course, we will put all the information in the description of this interview, of this episode. And thank you so much for sharing about this amazing job you do. And it is so helpful to know more about this. And before
Thank you,
we,
Elena.
yeah, before we wrap up this episode, is one thing that you would like to share that you think it is very important for our listeners?
Yeah, I would say don't get overwhelmed and just, depending on what your passions are and what you want to support, what causes you want to support, you can take baby steps in that direction. Don't feel like you need to throw out your entire closet and just start fresh with just, things that are responsibly sourced, because it can be very complicated and daunting. I would just say, make those strategic decisions. There's always going to be an organic apple and a conventional apple, right? And sometimes you have to have the conventional apple. Sometimes you can afford and to do the research and have the organic one. And so I would say the same for, frankly, all the products that you buy, all the businesses that you support. But if it's something that's of interest to you, do the research. You go to that business's website, look at their reports if they have publicly facing reports, and see what they're actually up to.
Yeah, yeah, great, really great advice. Yes, to be conscious about what we buy and who we support. Yes, that we, if we have a choice to support really ethical business or just support business which is not ethical, and we can choose. Yes, and it is really great to be aware of that, that there is always the choice, and to ask yourself who I support with this purchase. Yeah. Yes, so
Exactly.
so much, Chris. Yes, it was great. I learned a lot from this interview with you. And thank you so much for everything you do for consumers, for companies, and for workers who do that heavy things behind those products, and making them feel that they're taken care of. It is very important. Yes, because we know not all countries the same, and in some countries, government take that role and support and protect people who work, but other countries maybe not that, and you took that heavy load to do that part, and it is really amazing. So yes. So thank you for being
Thank you.
a guest on our podcast, and I wish you all the best and see you again somewhere in the future. We will speak more about responsible resourcing.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. It was a pleasure.